Good morning and welcome to Bible study for Wednesday, December 16th. My apologies, I've been called away for some family obligations and things that I need to take care of to keep things going in the right direction. So I pre-recorded this because I really enjoy our time together in Bible study and wanted to keep going. And so we are in Numbers chapter 8. We've started all the way back in January in Genesis and walking our way through the Bible. The first 5 books of the Bible are called the Pentateuch, and they are authored by Moses, as tradition tells us. And each book builds upon the last. And so in Numbers, we're taking the instructions that God gave to the Levites of how to model their new culture and society in relationship with God, and we're beginning to live those out. And so for a long time there's been the pause button on their journey. They left Egypt about a year ago. They're now at Mount Sinai. They've been at Mount Sinai for quite some time, and today is when we'll wrap up the Israelites' time on Mount Sinai as they begin to prepare for the next phase of their journey. So we're in chapter 8, verse 1. The Lord said to Moses, "Give Aaron the following instructions. When you set up the 7 lamps in the lampstand, place them so their light shines forward in the lamp in front of the lampstand." So Aaron did this. He set up the 7 lamps so they reflected their light forward, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. The entire lampstand, from its base to its decorative blossoms, was made of beaten gold. It was built according to the exact design the Lord had shown Moses. So again, we're hearing how they are being faithful now in doing the things that God has asked them to do. And God, throughout the scriptures, provides this framework where if you are faithful in little and small things, bigger and bigger things will be given. And so it's these recollections of how the Israelites began faithfully are important for how we see things progress in their culture. Verse 5, the Levites are now dedicated. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Now set the Levites apart from the rest of the people of Israel and make them ceremonially clean. Do this by sprinkling them with the water of purification and have them shave their entire body and wash their clothing." Now, we are blessed in modern day that most of us don't have an inkling of why they would do this. By shaving their entire body, they are ensuring there are no creepy crawly critters, no lice, no other elements that live in different parts of hair. And so by shaving them off, they're completely clean, and then they take a bath and they wash their clothes. And washing your clothes was kind of a big deal. It wasn't as simple as lifting up the lid of your washing machine, throwing in some Gain, and coming back in an hour and a half. It was manual labor that was hard work. Clothing textiles were largely made of wool as well as cotton, and so we have some really water absorbing fabrics that get quite heavy, and you're going to take these out to a lake or a river to wash them, and this is hard work. We don't exactly know how they washed all of their clothes on their journey in this day and time, but for example, as a historian, I know that the number one cause of death among women besides childbirth was drowning. Women would go to wash the clothes, as you know, and this data holds true all the way up to like the 18th century. So women who went down to the river to wash the clothes would then be swept away by current and the weight of their clothing. So washing clothes is a big deal, and it's something that didn't happen nearly as frequently back then. So here we have them getting ready and clean to be part of a ceremony. So have them bring a young bull and a grain offering and a choice of flour moistened with olive oil, and along with a second young bull for a sin offering. Then assemble the whole community of Israel and present the Levites at the entrance to the tabernacle. When you present the Levites before the Lord, the people of Israel must lay their hands on them. So throughout our history as Episcopalians, we have ordination ceremonies where the bishop lays hands on those who are to be ordained. Here we have something reverse happening for the Israelites. All of the people are laying their hands upon the Levites. So let's think about why this might be here. When the Levites are presented before the Lord, the people of Israel must lay their hands on them. And raising his hands, Aaron must then present the Levites to the Lord as a special offering from the people of Israel, thus dedicating them to the Lord's service. So all the people of Israel were dedicating these Levites to serve on their behalf. So when you lay your hands on somebody, you are taking a piece of what you have access to, or what you are guilty of, or what you are required to do, and you are putting it upon that person. And so in the tradition, the Levites are the stand-ins for all of the people of Israel's firstborn children. And so this is the total responsibility of the community for worship being placed upon these select few to lead them and to guide them. So next, the Levites are going to lay their hands on the heads of the young bulls, one to be presented as a sin offering and another as a burnt offering to the Lord, to purify the Levites and make them right with the Lord. So here we have at the foundation of leadership an acknowledgement that leaders are broken, fallible people subject to sin and continued broken relationship with God. And yet, God still calls them into service. But there is an atonement to be made. Some people have made some arguments that, it's okay for our leaders to do whatever because God works through broken people. Yes, but as we see the progression throughout the scripture, God works through broken people who are repentant. God works through broken people who are sorry, and God works through broken people who are actively working to give their brokenness over to God to be redeemed. So the people who are glorifying or engaging in rampant sin, these are not the leaders after God's own heart that some might claim them to be. It is important as we look at our leaders to look for people who are humble and who are willing to acknowledge their own sin. All right, so here we have the Levites. They've had their sin offering. Verse 13, then have the Levites stand in front of Aaron and his sons and raise your hands and present them as a special offering to the Lord. In this way, you will set the Levites apart from the rest of the people of Israel, and the Levites will belong to me. After this, they may go into the tabernacle and do their work, because you have purified them and presented to them as a special offering. So the whole idea is that until they are set apart, they are not yet worthy to begin the work. And the Episcopal Church, we hold some of this distinction still. We have a number of ministries in which we expect people to be licensed, people to hold an endorsement from their rector and their community of faith, and the bishop to license them to say, yes, this is a person that we have set apart for this service. And so we have the people who serve the chalice are our lay Eucharistic ministers, and they are licensed. And we have lay preachers, but they are licensed by the bishop to be people who will bear the word of God for this group of people. And we tend to take these as more than just a formality step, but a real way of designating God's leadership through specific people in specific times and places. So now that they've gotten to work, God reminds them, verse 16, of all the people of Israel, the Levites are reserved for me. I've claimed them for myself in place of all the firstborn sons of the Israelites. I have taken the Levites as their substitutes. For all the firstborn males among the people of Israel are mine, both of people and animals. I set them apart for myself on the day I struck down all the firstborn sons of the Egyptians. Yes, I have claimed the Levites in place of all the firstborn sons of Israel. And of all the Israelites, I have assigned the Levites to Aaron and his sons. They will serve in the tabernacle on behalf of the Israelites and make sacrifices to purify the people, so no plague will strike them when they approach the sanctuary. So these are the people who are set apart by God to do this work. And it says, in following the right people who are set apart to do the work, the people are protected from plague. Now, maybe it's simply because we're in the midst of a global pandemic right now, but the word plague gets my attention, and I hope it gets yours. The idea that illness, physical illness, can come upon the people of God as a result of spiritual malfeasance or spiritual misdoings is a indication in the Bible. Now, does this mean that everyone who has a chronic illness is in a state of sin? No. Does this mean that anybody who was born with a genetic ailment had a sinful father or mother? No. Again, Jesus teaches us when the blind man comes, who sins, this man or his parents? And Jesus says nobody sinned, and he heals him. But there is a reality that plague is a condemnation of the way that people are living their lives. And I think today, while we're battling COVID-19, we are much more aware of some of the battles going on with human sinful need. We, as humans, have expanded our territory more and more and are eroding the habitat of wild animals who contain all kinds of viruses and illnesses that we have no defense against. And so as human beings, we would be wise to look at the patterns of our life and ask ourselves, is this plague a result of human sin? Because the plagues in Egypt certainly were. And even though it wasn't so much an individual particular person, oh, it was all Joe's fault for doing that, the culture as a whole paid a high price for slavery and the unwillingness to let God's people go. And so I listen and I hear, oh, being set apart for God will protect them from plague. We've had some people who've made some very bold claims and statements about worship and houses of worship being exempt from precautions because God will protect them. And unfortunately, time and time again, we've seen how these events can be places where COVID-19 is spread. There seems to be no special immunity simply because we're gathered in the name of the Lord. So God promises that this time, this place, this group of people will be safe from plague. But it's not one of the universal covenant promises, much as we might wish it to be otherwise. So Moses, Aaron, and the whole community of Israel dedicated the Levites, following all the Lord's instructions to Moses. The Levites purified themselves from sin and washed their clothes, and Aaron lifted them up and presented them to the Lord as a special offering. my brain pictures Aaron doing a Simba moment where he's holding up the little baby priests, the Levites. That's not actually what happened. Aaron would have made a symbolic gesture of lifting them up to the Lord, as many of us do when we, in the liturgy, say we lift up our hearts. So Aaron did what they were supposed to do, and verse 22, after that the Levites went into the tabernacle to perform their duties, assisting Aaron and his sons. So they carried out all the commands that the Lord gave Moses concerning the Levites. The Lord instructed Moses, "This is the rule the Levites must follow. They must begin serving in the tabernacle at age 25, and they must retire at age 50. All right, so age 25, that's the age where they were considered a fighting man. So instead of in the earlier part of Numbers where we're taking census of the men capable of fighting, now we have, when you reach that age, you are also capable of serving the Lord in the temple. And 25 is an age that we have kept in the Episcopal Church tradition as a marker for ordination. To be ordained into the priesthood, you have to be at least 25. And we get it from right here. But you will note our mandatory retirement age is very different. Our mandatory retirement age is 72. At age 72, if you're a rector or a vicar, you're required to resign and take on a year-to-year approach to your leadership, pending your own personal remaining fit and keeping approval from the bishop. Now, why would God have limited faithful service to age 50? Well, he doesn't just say, well, you're done forever. Once you retire, God says after retirement, they may assist their fellow Levites by serving as guards at the tabernacle, but they need not officiate in the service. This is how you must assign duties to the Levites. So being a Levite assisting in the service to the priests was very physically demanding and hard. Remember, they are lifting up bulls and rams on a daily basis to sacrifice them to the Lord. You had to slaughter them and lift them and burn them and bring coal and stoke fire and haul away ashes and carcass and yuck. It was hard work. And I would imagine that 50 was probably a very reasonable time limit given the shorter lifespan and also lack of overall medical care for later in life. Now we have 72 again because that seems to be the age where, being a priest, it's a lot lazier of a job these days. We read a Bible, we're not schlepping stuff up onto the altar and carving and burning. It's mostly a mental exercise, and therefore age 72 is sort of that boundary that we've picked where maybe you might be starting to lose it a little bit and not so capable as you once were. So that's why we have that boundary. So now we've dedicated the Levites, we've got the tabernacle up and running, and now we are going to celebrate the second Passover. So a year ago they celebrated in Egypt on their way out, and now they're going to celebrate at Mount Sinai. A year after Israel's departure from Egypt, the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai. In the first month of that year, he said, "Tell the Israelites to celebrate the Passover at the prescribed time, at twilight, on the 14th day of the first month. Be sure to follow all my decrees and regulations concerning this celebration." So Moses told the people to celebrate the Passover in the wilderness of Sinai, as twilight fell on the 14th day of the month. And they celebrated the festival there, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. But some of the men had been ceremonially defiled by touching a dead body, so they could not celebrate the Passover that day. They came to Moses and Aaron that day and said, "We've become ceremonially unclean by touching a dead body. But why should we be prevented from presenting the Lord's offering at the proper time and with the rest of the Israelites?" And here Moses shows really good leadership. But he goes, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. Let me go and find out. Sometimes priests get themselves into trouble, or any leader, when they think, I have to know all the answers. I have to know what God wants. Rather than going, that's a good question. I don't know. Let's go and pray and find out together. And so Moses takes this question to God because it's a very reasonable one. Again, they probably didn't just happen upon a dead body and decide to go poke, poke, poke. This was probably a family member that had died, that they were honor bound to care for their body and to provide them a proper burial. So they're going, hey, I was doing what was right for me to do as a family member. Why then do I miss out on being part of the Passover? So Moses goes and he says, wait here until I've received instructions from the Lord. And he goes and he prays about it. And this is what God said to Moses about this. Give the following instructions to the people of Israel. If any of the people now or in future generations are ceremonially unclean at the Passover time because of touching a dead body, or if they are on a journey and cannot be present at the ceremony, they may still celebrate the Lord's Passover. They must offer the Passover sacrifice 1 month later, at twilight, on the 14th day of the second month. They must eat the Passover lamb at that time with bitter salad greens and bread made without yeast. They must not leave any of the lamb until the next morning, and they must not break any of its bones. They must follow all the normal regulations concerning the Passover. So God says, yes, I still want you to remember the Passover, but I also want you to do it when you're in a state of cleanliness. So God says it's better to do it the right way, the wrong time, than to do it the wrong way at the right time. This is something that is hard for me as more of a type A, type 1 personality. I like things to be in order and on time, and I like to get started right on time and go until we're supposed to end and then stop. And God says, you know what? It is better to honor me fully than it is to do it at the right time. And so I think it's important to have this sense of flexibility within ourselves as we worship, to be willing to do things in God's timing and not ours. But that is hard to do. But also, God doesn't just say, okay, it's okay whenever for you to do it, whenever you want, however you want. There is an expectation that you will do this. And if you decide not to participate in the Passover without good reason, there's a consequence. In verse 13, but those who neglect to celebrate the Passover at the regular time, even though they are ceremonially clean and not away on a trip, will be cut off from the community of Israel. If they fail to present the Lord's offering at the proper time, they will suffer the consequences of their guilt. And if foreigners living among you want to celebrate the Passover to the Lord, they must follow those same decrees and regulations. The same laws apply to both native-born Israelites and to the foreigners living among you. So this is their second Passover, and God intended them to keep carrying forward this tradition year after year. And we know that they don't always do it, because we're going to get later into Chronicles and Judges where we hear about them finding the scrolls and going, we haven't been celebrating the Passover. No wonder God has been in judgment of us. But for now, things are okay and they're on track. And God is going to keep them on track by continuing to guide them day after day. Verse 15, on the day the tabernacle was set up, the cloud covered it. But from evening until the morning, the cloud over the tabernacle looked like a pillar of fire. This was a regular pattern. At night, the cloud that covered the tabernacle had the appearance of fire. Whenever the cloud lifted from over the tent, the people of Israel would break camp and follow it. And wherever the cloud settled, the people of Israel would set up camp. In this way they traveled and camped at the Lord's command wherever he told them to go. Then they remained in their camp as long as the cloud stayed over the tabernacle. If the cloud remained over the tabernacle for a long time, the Israelites stayed and performed their duty to the Lord. Sometimes the cloud would stay over the tabernacle for only a few days, so the people would stay for only a few days, as the Lord commanded. Then at the Lord's command, they would break camp and move on. Sometimes the cloud stayed only overnight and lifted the next morning. But day or night, when the cloud lifted, the people broke camp and moved on. Whether the cloud stayed above the tabernacle for 2 days, a month, or a year, the people of Israel stayed in camp and did not move on. But as soon as it lifted, they broke camp and moved on. So they camped or traveled at the Lord's command, and they did whatever the Lord told them through Moses. Now, I don't know about you, but I wish sometimes that we had such obvious, discernible communication from God about whether he would have us stay or go. I have in my life experienced probably 3 different times where God made me so viscerally uncomfortable where I was at that I was forced to move on and to enter into a new phase and a new chapter of my journey in life. Now, maybe some of you are better at listening to God than I am, but I would begin to feel like maybe it was time, maybe God was calling me to this next thing, but I never wanted to be the one who jumped or went until I was sure. And so I've experienced this repeated pattern of my life beginning to feel like a shoe that I've outgrown, where things are rubbing and causing friction and tension in places that they never did before, as a sign of God being like, come on, it's time to move on and move forward. And I'm getting better, I think, at listening, but I truly wish that we had fire. We have a taste of this in our Pentecost story where tongues of flames appear upon the people and they are called and given the gift to prophesy. And sometimes we meet someone where we see the Holy Spirit is so clearly at work in their life and in their words to us that we just go, oh, God is speaking to me through you. I've been blessed to have that happen often enough that I know it happens and I trust it when it does. But I sure wish it was a regular basis. I experienced a moment in seminary where I had doubts of whether I was called to finish or not, because I'd been going along faithfully doing what God had asked me to do, and all along the way I felt guided and guarded and led. And then there was this moment in my 3rd year where I was just like not hearing from God, and I didn't know what that was about. And I had the good fortune to have a good friend who is my mentor, who I talked to, who said, Tracy, sometimes you're not seeing God calling or moving or asking more because you're doing exactly what God has for you to do right here in this moment. And so I prayed with that and I let it sit with me, and I realized that that was true. God was not remaining silent so much as God was waiting for me to finish my part of that journey right there at seminary. And as soon as I was done with my master's in divinity, I actually began again getting some really clear guidance of what to do next. Sometimes we don't hear from God because we're doing the right thing and we're on our way, or we're staying put until God would have us get moving again. I think particularly in modern culture where we want to know what's next, we want to know when it's going to happen, and we want to know how to predict it, This whole idea of patterning our life that 2 days, a month, a year, we might wait to hear from God what comes next, seems a little bit hard to swallow. But I think we would have a more faithful journey if we did. One of the things that I hope we'll do in the next couple of weeks is look at a map of what happens to the Israelites on this journey through the wilderness. Because they're on a pretty straightforward journey until they refuse to go where God asked them to. And then suddenly everything starts meandering and getting real weird. I think all of us are on this kind of a journey where we either move when we're not called to move yet, or we stay put when God is calling us forward. But regardless, we have an opportunity to recalibrate our journey on a regular basis by touching in with God faithfully in prayer. I'm going to wrap up here. Actually, no. We'll go a few more verses because even though this is the chapter 10 break, I would argue that verse 11 is where the real break happens. So they're getting ready to wrap everything up. They know when they're supposed to leave and when they're supposed to stay. And God gives them one final gift. He gives them an organizational tool of a trumpet. Now the Lord said to Moses, "Make 2 trumpets of hammered silver for calling the community to assemble and for signaling the breaking of camp. When both trumpets are blown, everyone must gather at the entrance to the tabernacle. But if only one trumpet is blown, then only the leaders, the heads of the clans of Israel, must present themselves to you. When you sound the signal to move on, the tribes camped on the east side of the tabernacle must break camp and move forward. When you sound the signal a second time, the tribes camped on the south will follow. You must sound short blasts as the signal for moving on. But when you call to the people to an assembly, blow the trumpets with a different signal. Only the priests, Aaron's descendants, are allowed to blow the trumpets. This is a permanent law for you to be observed from generation to generation. When you arrive in your own land and go to war against your enemies who attack you, sound the alarm with trumpets. Then the Lord your God will remember you and rescue you from your enemies. Blow the trumpets in times of gladness too, sounding them at your annual festivals and at the beginning of each month. And blow the trumpets over your burnt offerings and peace offerings. The trumpets will remind you of your God and of his covenant with you. I am the Lord your God." So, like we use a school bell or a PA system, calling all teachers or calling everyone on campus to listen, pay attention, and to know what's coming next, and to signal the movements throughout the day. They use the trumpets for this. And so they've done everything they needed to do. They've got their organizational orders, and they're ready now to leave Sinai. But note that God has framed their leaving with what is ahead. When you arrive, you will find enemies who will attack you. But sound the alarm, and the Lord your God will remember you and rescue you. They knew they were headed into trouble. They knew they were headed into times of trial. They just got done having an entire census where they counted all the people who were capable of fighting. Surely they didn't need to do that just to go and sing Kumbaya and make a peace treaty. But when they get there, and they see how hard it might be, they doubt. I wonder how many of us have stood on the precipice of change, have stood at the entrance to a promised land of a new job or a new life or a new family or a new undertaking, and have doubted whether we had what it takes and whether God would help us or not. I hope as we stand on a precipice of ending 2020 and look into 2021, we are prepared to enter a new promised land, a new year of discovery and a new year of loving and serving the Lord together, and a new year of finding ways to do so faithfully, even in a pandemic. I thank you for spending time with me today, and I look forward to picking up with you next week in chapter 10, verse 11 of Numbers. And we'll meet again at our regular time of 11 a.m. I forgot, 11 a.m. next Wednesday. Take care and God bless.